serious hikers, campers, woodsmen and the like, what are your scariest experiences in their woods? My buddies and I were camping in the woods in Yosemite, CA. We were the only ones in the area, and we knew this because of the camping registry. We were quite literally the only ones in a 20-mile radius. Anyways, everything was great and normal, and our campsite was on the side of a lake. At night, we all shared an 8-man tent. It was cozy with 8 guys in a tent, but not horrible. Anyways, at about 3 AM the first night, we were all suddenly awoken by one member of our group standing up in the tent and frantically opening the tent door. He poked his head out and began super frantically and nervously saying, "There's someone in our camp." He kept repeating it and sounded absolutely terrified. Needless to say, we were ducking horrified that someone might be in our camp because we knew that we were supposed to be alone. Everyone who had just been woken up was looking at each other with mortified looks on our faces. After about 15 seconds of saying that someone was in our camp, he laid back down like nothing had happened and slept. The Methodica was sleepwalking, and there was no one in the camp. It was hard to fall back asleep. I was camping in PA with someone from West Coast once. We were sitting around the fire talking, and he looks up and gets really quiet and says he sees someone coming towards us. We hadn't seen anyone not he trail in the 3 days we'd been out so far, and the trail log didn't show anyone else on the trail either. After a bit he says he can't see them anymore. This happens a few times. Every 2 minutes he would say he can see someone coming towards us up the trail, then saying he can't see them. And we can't hear any footsteps and nobody has even walked by us. Eventually he tries to point them out to us. "See the light over there? It's like a headlamp flashing as they pass trees." Turns out he was seeing lighting bugs for the first time and was mistaking one for a hiker's headlamp. We had a good laugh over that. He was amazed at the lightning bugs. I even caught one so he could get a close look at it. Went turkey hunting with my dad in the Shawnee National Forest several years ago. I was about 10. Took one afternoon to hike and scout hunting spots. Along the trail we saw a few blood splatters and drips, but not big deal. It's nature. About 1.4 mile up the trail, however, we come up to 3 dogs hanging from a tree, gutted, bled out, and skinned. Okay, now that was pretty weird and scary. We kept going a bit further as there was a bluff not too far up the way that was pretty cool to look at. Come to the bluff. Find weird symbols burned into the ground and on the sides of the rock wall. Candle wax absolutely everywhere and more blood all over the ground. By that time my dad, whom I've never seen scared in my life, looked at me and said, "Let's go," and we took off at a pretty quick pace back to the camp. The worst part is that we didn't leave the campsite, so that night I laid awake in the camper freaking out at every sound I heard. Still get goosebumps thinking about that event to this day. Bedded down for the night on my tarp. A few minutes later heard some rustling coming from my immediate left, turned on my flashlight to see a bear's ass literally 2 feet from my nose, using one of its front paws, and faced a rifle through my pack. I'd like to say I let out a manly war cry to scare it away, brown bear, but it came out more of a H-O-O-O-O-H. Bear scampers forward, trips on the pack, face plants into a fallen log, looks back at me like it's my fault, then runs off. Then another time, an elk stepped on me while I was asleep. Hurt like a mother. Fortunately didn't pierce my wrap canvas. I yelled in pain. Elk gave one of those whistle bugle cries and stomped off. That was scarier than the bear. If it had stomped on me, I'd have a minimum of a few broken ribs. At night at my fire, getting ready to cook up some food. This damn coyote, I think, was kinda dark, sneaks up, grabs my food bag, and just runs off with it. I didn't see it until he had the satchel in his mouth. So I take off after it. It drops the sack under some trees, runs a bit further, and turns around to watch me. As I stop to grab my food, I hear more coyotes from in front of me, close, and to the right. First one was still looking at me. Didn't sleep much that night. I post this story every time this question comes up. I enjoy reliving it as I comment. When I was about 13, my parents and I took a trip to Yellowstone National Park. While hiking a trail we heard a huge crash and a loud scream. Watch out were the words yelled out from someone, not in sight on the trail ahead. Hundreds of buffalo appeared crashing through the trees coming towards us. Executing our natural flight response to this dismal turn of events, we ran as fast as we could through the woods. I tripped at one point and will remember screaming out to my mother, who was already there to help me out. My father yelled to us to follow him as he started running up the hill on the other side of the path. 5 seconds later we saw the herd of buffalo passing us. Turns out if you are ever being chased by a herd of buffalo you should run uphill, because the herd will naturally go downhill. We went to a diner right after that for lunch and I ordered a buffalo burger. Gave me a sense of victory. LOL. I guess maybe both were scenarios of karmic retribution. And as for your posting it each time, the fun part is I haven't read this story before. So that's nice, and I love all the AskReddits that have to do with the woods. The woods are some scary things. I guess it's like the ocean, in that you're subjecting yourself to literally someone else's world. I haven't had anything too serious, but at a park here in Colorado I once saw a sign that said mountain lions are common here, but don't worry, you won't see them. That unnerved me a bit. Later that night, sitting around the campfire, and suddenly my German Shepherd bolts up and just stares into the darkness. Dude, stop that. I went for a hike at about 10 PM one night. As I was walking I heard some people behind me a ways. I zoned in on their conversation and heard them talking about sneaking up on me to scare me. In that moment I became what was hiding in the darkness. Basically I hid behind a big tree and waited for them to catch up. Jumped out and scared the crap out of what turned out to be a couple preteens who must have snuck out of the house that night. They ran away screaming, and I went home to reevaluate my life choices. The end. It's always scary when you're sitting by the fire minding your own business, and then your dog gets up and starts barking into the darkness. Camping in general can be freaky. Not so much during the day, but when it gets dark, it gets dark. Whenever people say the Blair Witch Project wasn't scary I always ask them if they've ever been camping. If you have, then that movie probably freaks you the duck out. Laying in your tent at night not knowing what is 3 feet away from you is terrifying. It's pitch black and quiet, like being alone in a creaky old house, except with a multiply 10 multiplier. Every sound could be a bear, wolf, or person out to get you, and if you're in a tent you can't see what's out there. Probably my freakiest experience happened when I was a kid and went camping in Colorado. It was dark, but still too early for us to be tired, so we were just sitting around the fire doing the do. Talking, eating s'mores, whatever. I would say we were telling scary stories, but duck that. We were probably talking about Disney movies or some shit. Now keep in mind how dark it is out there. The light from the fire only goes out so far, and it creates like this wall where all light stops. We were sitting there when all of a sudden my sister looked up and saw a pair of eyes looking at us. Me and my sister started freaking out. We were like right on the edge of lose our minds scared. Our parents calmed us down and told us not to move. We had no idea what it was. It was nearly impossible to judge how big it was. So we just sat there and waited for it to go away, which it did. It was probably a raccoon or some shit, but 6-year-old me was pretty sure it was the chupacabra. Not too interesting of a story, but definitely freaked us out. My dad admits to this day he wasn't scared, but notoriously has never been able to handle scary movies on any level. I call bullshit, Dad. You were scared. I know exactly what you mean about the wall of darkness. Went camping with some friends in the Smoky Mountains as a kid. The mountains are home to black bear, so you have to keep that fact in mind. While sitting around the fire chatting on the first night, we hear something rustling in the leaves just outside of the light. We all go quiet and trying to figure out what the animal was. Then out of the dark walks a skunk. Everyone freezes and looks at each other like WTF. Luckily no one freaked and scared the damn thing. We all stayed where we were, pulled our feet up slowly, and just sat as still as possible. He wandered around the campsite and right under our seats looking for drop scraps of food. When he didn't find anything, he exited back into the darkness on the opposite side of camp. A few minutes later we heard screaming from the other side of the campground, and a short time after that in wafted skunk aroma. Bastard came back every night we were there. I was hiking the Appalachian Trail northbound in early August a few years ago, and I was a day out of Davenport Gap heading to Hot Springs, NC. I don't remember the exact shelter I was at, but I know it was north of Maximum Patch. That time of year, there aren't many people on the trail, and other than a couple cars at Maximum Patch, I hadn't seen or spoken to another person in a full day. I decided to end my hike for the day at about 7 p.m. so I could eat dinner and prepare for bed before dark. I was also filming a little diary of my hike as a gift for my sister. I ate, filmed, reloaded on my water, and hit the hay right as it got dark and the crickets came out. At about 2:30 a.m. I was startled awake, but not by a noise, rather the absolute silence around me. I didn't hear the toads, crickets, owls that you'd expect to hear, and that I had heard when I had gone to sleep just 6 hours earlier. I looked around, but saw nothing. Everything was perfectly still. I made the decision that I had to get the duck out of there. I packed all my gear in about 5 minutes, threw on my headlamp, grabbed my bear bag and noped my way up the trail. I'm pretty sure I averaged 4 miles per hour in the pitch black until sunrise. Because of such an early departure, I finished my planned 18 miles into Hot Springs by 10 a.m., which was nice. To this day I have no idea what was there that morning, but I know something was there. I've encountered tons of predators in the woods, from black bears to coyotes, but I've never experienced that calm like that before. Made me think maybe it was some sort of large cat, or worse, some crazy person. Who knows what would have happened had I stayed until sunrise. Maybe nothing, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. I've heard this happens quite a bit. People will all of a sudden feel an overwhelming get out now feeling, and have no idea why. Nothing is ever seen around them, but we all know it's there, waiting. This will probably get buried, but 2 years ago, myself and 2 other people were camping in Yellow Bottom, which is in the Cascades of Oregon. About 3 a.m. I woke up hearing what sounded like a bunch of people having a campfire party. Nothing huge, not even scary, just talking, laughing, stuff like that. I was kind of pissed, since we'd specifically come up to get away from the college kids and such, and now somebody had set up camp what sounded like less than 100 yards away, but I couldn't see fire or light through the tent walls, and since that was my big concern, fire in the woods, I just kind of ground my teeth about it and went back to sleep. About an hour later, I wake up again. This time somebody's let a little kid start crying, and it's really annoying. Like, not wailing but just sniffles. That long-term crying that kids do. I listen for about 5 minutes, and since I'm not a monster, I've kind of got this prickly feeling that maybe there's trouble. You know, little kid crying all alone. Where the heck are its parents? Etc. I started to get up and my friend, who either was sleeping, grabs my arm, just about giving me a heart attack, and says don't go out there, just wait. He knows the woods better than me, and he sounded actually scared. So I sit and wait, and yeah, a few minutes later, the crying stops and the party starts back up. But the weird this is, I can't really pinpoint now what direction the party is coming from, because I was trying to tell if maybe it was a group who had found the kid and now they were all talking together, but I couldn't tell what direction it was from. The party went on for about another hour, just until dawn. Then all of a sudden, nothing, like, cut off in the middle of a laugh silence. I was completely freaked out by then, and I think I might have made a noise when it just stopped like that. My friend, who hadn't even sat up the entire time, just said stick engines, and then rolled over and fell back asleep. I got up when the sun was finally completely up and made coffee and kind of looked around, but I'm not brave like that and didn't go far. But there was nothing. No campfire, not tents I could see through the trees. Nothing. We packed up that day and I asked him what a stick Indian was, and he wouldn't tell me. Had to come back and Google it. And even now I'm not sure if what's online is true or made up, or what. But if you look it up, apparently it's some kind of Yaquina forest spirit that lures people out by making noises like crying babies or people having a party and then, I don't know, eats them, or something. So that's my creepy thing in the woods. I don't have any proof, but people who know the Pacific Northwest. It was way up Yellow Bottom, past the official camps, on the left-hand fork of the main road, down that logging road and right by the river. The campsite with the huge fallen over dead trees. That one. Me. I've never been back up there. No sir. I was hunting a big field for whitetail. It was public land and I decided not to set up a tree stand and just sit behind some heavy cover on the ground. I try to get to my spots well before sunup, so I'm not making noise at first light. When many deer start to move, I got to my spot at about 5 AM. It was absolutely pitch black and all I had was my headlamp. After I switched off my headlamp, it was quiet for about 30 seconds when suddenly I heard a howl from my right side. It was clear the howl came from the edge of the field I was in, roughly 200 yards away. It sent shivers down my spine. About 30 seconds passed when I heard a second howl in the opposite direction, on the other end of the field, probably 200 yards the other way. At this point I'm pretty freaked out, but I figure it's highly unlikely anything would attack me. Not much longer, and from directly behind me, somewhere in the thick of the woods, a third howl. I now feel surrounded, and I'm terrified. My truck was about 500 yards away to my left, along the edge of the woods in the field, and down a narrow path that cuts right through the woods. I flicked on my headlamp, took the safety off my gun, equipped my hunting knife, and got the duck out as fast as I could. I waited until the sun came up before I went back and actually hunted. I never saw a deer that entire weekend. I presume whatever was howling drove the deer out, and I don't blame the deer one bit. The entire experience was very scary, and I've done a lot of hunting, camping, etc. I've spent a ton of time in the woods both during the day and night, and nothing has ever freaked me out so bad. Edit: I do believe it was wolf, not coyotes. The area doesn't hold a lot of wolves, but it is known to have some. I know the difference between a wolf and coyote howl. I'll just admit I was so freaked out maybe I thought it sounded like wolves, and convinced myself of it.